All right, John, how's everything going?
Good. I've been busy, so my current show is shooting right now.
Hmm.
So we're moving on to our last block of episodes, 9 and 10. So we're in post, we're in prep, and we're shooting the block four. So it's very, very busy right now for me.
Nice. Well, yeah,
Yeah.
that's what we're.
Is it happening all like stacked together?
Kind of, yeah. So we're block shooting it. So essentially we are shooting the episodes, and then as those episodes finish editorial, we begin our visual effects work on those episodes. Um, so there's the first two episodes in the series are currently underway in post at the moment.
Huh.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know if it's us. It sounds like a lot of work. Are you working today?
I have a little bit of stuff to catch up on, because obviously when we're shooting during the week,
Yeah.
um it's hard to it's just hard to
It's just
it's hard
hard.
to prep uh, two episodes while shooting two episodes while posting six episodes.
Yeah.
It's like,
Yeah, it's wild.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so a little bit today, but I'm hoping to get out and go for a walk or a hike or something.
Oh yeah, do a hike out in LA for sure.
Yeah.
The so I have like my little list of questions. So let's tackle some of it. So Queen's Gambit is probably like, would you say that's like the biggest show that you've worked on? Or is like that's it?
As as a VFX supervisor, yes.
Yeah. Well, yeah,
Um,
as a VFX suit, yeah.
yeah.
So in your from your memory, what's like the most memorable part about that show? I mean, we've all seen kind of VFX breakdowns and everything, but just like for you personally, what was like the thing that you really remember working on that?
Well, I mean, to me, what was special about that project really was how cohesive the team was. And I don't just mean the visual effects team. I mean, everybody all the way through that project, from the beginning of prep until the very end, the entire post team, the shooting crew, the art department, like everybody was so intent on making that show the best that it could possibly be, and everybody was like fully committed to
Yeah,
making it as good as it could possibly be in the time that we had,
yeah,
um which I thought was really, really special. And I think that's what kind of helped make that show, you know it definitely contributed to the success of the show, I think, in a direct way. Of course, nobody can discount Anya Taylor-Joy's incredible performance, and all the other actors, and the incredible story that Scott Frank wrote and all that. But yeah, I think that's what made that awesome. And when we were working on the visual effects work, a lot of what we were basing all of our designs, our map paintings, the environments, and all that stuff on was either concept art from the art department or other research that they had done, uh, in addition to our own research on period Russia, period Mexico, all these other places
yeah,
and stuff. And also the general aesthetic of the show. The show had a very interesting production design to it. Like
yeah,
the
like the
the
aesthetic.
sets
Yeah,
had, there were patterns on patterns. It was a very
yeah,
interesting thing you don't see in a lot of shows. But we tried to take that into account when we designed things. We had really a fantastic group of artists and
do
folks
you
on
think
it.
what do you think drives like that kind of cohesiveness? Because it doesn't happen on every show. And so when something's that cohesive, do you think it's like what you were saying? Is it kind of like the prep that drives that kind of cohesiveness, or is it just having like a visual language that everyone follows? Or
It's definitely a cohesive visual language. It's a lot of it really filters down from the in my opinion, production designer and the cinematographer is sort of establishing a style and a look. And of course, having a director or a showrunner who has a very clear idea of what they want and maintains that aesthetic throughout the show, when you have something like that, then everybody else,
Yeah.
myself and the visual effects department included, can basically take that and extrapolate on it,
Yeah.
So when I'm working on a period show like the Queens Gambit or my current show, The Offer, a lot of the cues and designs and all that kind of stuff is really tied very closely with the production designer and the art department. Because essentially they're designing a world, they're designing the aesthetic, and we're expanding on it. We're building it out. We're building the set extensions. We're expanding, Russia or Mexico, wherever you are, and kind of just elaborating on what in theory they would build if they had an unlimited budget. You know what I mean?
Right.
Exactly.
Yeah. So that's how I personally kind of like to approach that sort of stuff, because I'm definitely not of the mindset like, oh cool, we shot this thing and now we're going to go and do whatever we want. No, we have to make sure it's fitting in the style and look of the show.
Yeah, you can definitely see that. Like now that you're mentioning it, it's like that was like a feature of that show, because I remember when I was seeing it, it's like, because what you're saying is true. It's just like you see some shows and there is like the visual language isn't 100%, but in that show it was 100%. I think like it really was everything was on the same page in that way.
Yeah. I mean, it's a mindset that I'd like to carry forth no matter what I work on in the future, whether I, work on a sci-fi show or some kind of medieval thing or whatever it is, that comes down the line one day. I really believe in that close collaboration with the production designer, and even, in terms of cinematography too, like we had a few shots in the dormitory where we had to actually like take over the camera or do some like CG kind of camera moves and stuff. And one of the things that we were doing in previs is I was actually showing it to the cinematographer, who was off on probably something else by then or on a break or whatever he was up to, but he wasn't, on the show day to day anymore because we had wrapped. But I had showed him some of the previs we did, and I asked him, I was like, does this feel like something that you would have shot if you did shoot this? And he was like, yeah, cool. It looks cool. It feels like something that I would have shot. And that's something that we tried to do, make sure that we weren't just doing some arbitrary thing that you couldn't shoot with the lenses that we had, the equipment that we had, and
the consistency of keeping the style of the person that it was behind the cameras.
Exactly. And Steven Meisler was our camera operator on that show. So in addition to being the cinematography, his hands were on the camera.
He's the person,
So it was really important that it felt the same as whatever he was doing in the rest of the show.
Right. So I don't remember the exact dates, but did COVID happen during Queen's Gambit?
Yeah. So basically, we wrapped shooting in December of 2019.
Okay.
And
just missed it.
Yeah. Well, we kind of. We started getting into post. I think we were 2-3 months in, and then February, March rolled around, and then everything moved remote. Post moved remote. Reviews moved remote. So fortunately, I was with Chicken Bone for that show, and fortunately they had a completely like cloud-based infrastructure. So Thankfully,
That's
it wasn't
lucky, right?
Yeah.
we wouldn't have been able to deliver on time otherwise, I don't think, because
Yeah.
there would have been too much involved with migrating to a remote workflow, and we had a very tight schedule and a lot to get done on that show. So that I think was a tremendous help, and everybody at that facility was incredibly supportive of the efforts on the show.
Awesome. Awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, I always wonder, but I always ask this question because of what you're saying. It's like everyone's situation is slightly different. So I'm always curious, like, to see like what happened, like when COVID hit. It's like, how did people go remote? Because me and Oz have kind of worked remotely and worked cloud-based for a long time, so we're always just curious to see like how people do it, because it's such like a new frontier that's happening with all this stuff.
Yeah,
So
I think for us, where it was the most challenging was we, during shooting, Scott and I had developed a good working relationship with each other, and something that was important to me was having a lot of that face-to-face interaction, because he was going to be in the editorial suite in New York, and we were in New York, and when we started doing reviews in person, it was really nice to be able to sit in a room and look at things together and point at things with laser pointers and all this kind of stuff. And then when we moved remote, it was like, okay, now we're looking at things on a tiny screen instead of a projector, and everybody's in their own homes, and the internet is collapsing, because literally at this point in time, everybody in the country was working remotely, right? So the internet was taking a hit. And you're looking at things and it's fuzzy, and we have you've seen the show, we have a lot of dark environment, dark environments don't do well with video compression.
No, that's all, because that's all you see. All you see is compression.
Yeah, it's really tough. Yeah. So it was kind of challenging to review these things and make sure that especially with the chess pieces, which have all this like really fine, intricate detail, like making sure that people were able to see what we were doing, because it would just get lost in video artifact. We had these little dust modes floating, or the spinny like noise kind of stuff in there. We had like, I don't know, whatever it was, like 40 render passes or something that went into these things. And like,
because it's such a big part of the whole thing. And it's arguably like one of the biggest VFX sequences in the whole thing, and it's basically in darkness, right? It's a shot, and it takes place in a dark room.
Yeah, it's moonlit.
That's wild.
Yeah.
I'm gonna.
Do you think that helped, knowing that eventually this will be streamed and also compressed? Do you think that helped you know what kind of detail was getting lost?
That's a good question. I mean, when I watched the show on Netflix, it looked good. Like, whatever they do with their compression on their content, it looked pretty darn close to what our renders look like. That being said, I don't think, because of COVID, I never actually saw those final frames like projected on a screen in a color suite or something. Right. So I believe all the details there, but like, it was like, we were doing our best guess, because even when you're working on a remote workstation, you're still not seeing one-to-one with what's really there. I mean, it's still, there's still,
it's very hard to do, at least to get one-to-one.
Yeah. I mean, it's getting better, it's getting closer, but like, it's like,
it's just hard to do.
Saw the final frames with my own eyes.
You're gonna have to wait for like the archival remaster, release it in 8K in a theater somewhere.
Maybe somebody will screen it in like a theater one day as like a 2020
like somewhere in Brooklyn. It'll be like a film house kind of theater, when they like reprise its glory. Going back to on set for a second, so obviously in post-production, kind of the opinion seems that post-COVID, there's some permanent changes that are happening. Like a lot of people think work from home is going to kind of stick around, and like to some extent, like there's going to be some hybrid work environments. Do you think on set that there's like a similar comparison on set? Like, are there permanent changes that are going to come about from all of this? Or are people just trying really hard to go back to exactly where they were prior to?
Yeah, I mean, at least in terms of the shooting crew that's on set, I'm sure people would prefer to not have to wear masks for 10 to 12 hours per day.
Yeah.
And of course, we get tested if you're zone A, like people who are close to the cast during the day. You're tested sometimes 3 times a week, or some shows we're doing 5 times a week at a certain point. My show is currently 3 times a week. So I get tested 3 times a week. But people who are in like zone B, who have less day-to-day interaction with the cast, are like testing 1 time a week right now or something like that. But basically, I think what it really comes down to is the studio wants all the shows to be safe. They, the unions have certain kinds of agreements as far as, return to work protocols, things like that, because they also want their union members to be safe. Ultimately, what it really is, it's an insurance issue. Nobody wants somebody to get sick and end up in the hospital or die or something working on a project for a particular company. So it's, I think the current protocols will remain until we've determined that it's safe enough to probably get on an airplane without a mask and fly somewhere, or until we've determined that, if everybody's vaccinated and certain kinds of other things are in place, then it's fine. My show has a health and safety person who deals just with the COVID aspect of things.
Right.
And I think every show does by this point, but
probably.
I just do what I have to do to get the job done, to be honest. if it's wear a mask and have my nose swabbed 3 times a week, fine. Whatever gets it done,
Right.
Would I prefer not? Sure. But
yeah.
It's
kind of a, I guess it's like a shame thing, because it's like, if you're on set, there's really no upside to it, because some people like for us, like some people like doing the work from home stuff and whatever, but like there's not a lot of upside to it on the on-set side. You just have to, it's just kind of painful because you have to do all the tests and everything, and it's probably going to stick around for a little bit, right?
I imagine so. I imagine at least for probably another couple of years at least. It really just comes down to when we actually, not we, but whomever
The world.
considers the pandemic has ended and that the risk is no longer super serious, and whatever that means,
Right.
But for me, it's just now it's part of the job, It's just like, okay, well, it's just like saying if you work in some kind of other hazardous environment, you have to do certain kinds of protocols, and hey, that's just what we have to do.
Right.
But yeah.
Let's
go
for it.
I'm getting like a feeling recently that it's just gonna end up as like people get tired of like fighting over like having vaccines or not, or having a mask. So it's just gonna end up like do whatever you want at a certain point. Like I feel like that's how it's gonna go in a couple of years, probably.
I don't know. At least maybe in general, but as far as certain productions go, I know that some studios have mandated that their crews are vaccinated, or other kinds of protocols, things like that. But obviously it's a hotly debated topic in and of
Yeah.
itself, the whole COVID thing, the vaccine thing.
Outside of our industry, yeah, it's just in life.
Yeah, but I mean, my hope is that eventually we don't have to do this. I don't really entirely mind the idea of always wearing a mask on the plane because I feel like every time I've flown somewhere, I always get like a cold or something.
Exactly.
Because
I haven't had a cold in like a year and a half.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
And it's
surprisingly, because I always get a cold in the winter.
Yeah.
So yeah,
it is like no, you make a good point. It's like a funny little, well, it's like what the Japanese do. Like there's not much of a stigma to wearing a mask at all. And
right.
it kind of just keeps everybody healthy. So maybe there is some kind of like, maybe not, people might not give up in the sense that they'll stop wearing masks. It might be the other way around where people are just going to be like, well, maybe this is actually kind of okay.
Yeah. I mean,
Well,
for me, what it is like on set, I end up like changing my mask like 4 times a day or something like that. And I've found a certain style of mask that seems to be the most comfortable for my face. But it ends up, especially when you're shooting in like warm weather, like really hot weather, like a hot day and you're outside and stuff. And and if I have like stubble like I do right now, which happens when I'm too busy to shave.
Right, exactly. It's everyone there.
So what happens? My face ends up grinding the mask into like these fibers, and then it starts tickling my nose all day. It drives me insane. So I end up asking our COVID folks on our COVID PAs on set for like new masks. I'm just like, I got to change this thing because it's driving me crazy.
You need to get one of those like almost like those like see-through helmet things that they have now.
I've seen that.
Like the advanced masks, That's gonna be. We're just turning it. Everything's turning into like a weird like Dune dystopia. It's like all of those movies were right. They were all right. Well, books. Sorry, I'm.
except
The movie's great, but
except with the sand screens. They were
Oh,
right,
yeah,
except the sand screen.
Should we talk about the sand screens?
I'm just so curious about it. I mean, like if it.
So me and
like
us,
in my
me and
mind
us
when I
think,
first heard about it, I'm like, I don't really know exactly how this could work, but
yeah.
I mean, if it worked,
I don't
hey,
think it worked.
what it really comes down to is getting it done, having it look good, and having everybody in the process be happy with it. So if it was the kind of thing where that director found blue screen to be distracting and offensive during his shooting process, and he preferred that there was some other kind of color used, and DNEG or whoever had some kind of plan in place for how they were going to deal with this, and it was all sorted and everybody knew about it, right? That the expectations were laid out, the prices were adjusted to compensate for whatever that methodology was, and everybody was happy in the end. Great,
Right.
If it did involve a bunch of roto or something, if it wasn't keyable, again, I don't know the inner workings of that show because I wasn't involved with it. But
yeah, I think that's why it's so fascinating because I think everyone, like, we're all kind of sitting. It's like, what? How did they do this exactly? Because it's trick. Because I don't know.
Think
like,
what bothers me is not how they did it. Because I don't have any issue with like, okay, you want to put like purple on the back, use purple. But like the fact that they do this, okay, you want to put sand, perfectly fine. But then like, don't tell me that you use this magical trick that nobody ever noticed in 30 years. Because I really highly doubted that whatever, I read in that article was real, that they managed to like key it by just inverting the image. Because like inverting the image will invert everything, even the characters. So
yeah, I don't know about that. I mean,
that's what really bothers me, inventing this PR stunts that are like completely fake, and makes like visual effects even more like an abstract, problem that it's not. It's very simple. Like it's an everyday thing that we do with, like, there's been visual effects for 30 years with green screen or blue screen, like it's
Yeah.
pretty simple that way. Like
I
that,
like
just say that you roto it. Like it's
yeah.
perfectly fine.
Well, that's what I
Like,
like. I like Christopher Nolan's approach because he just doesn't use screens, and he's proud of it. He's just like, yeah, I don't like them. I think that I don't like the spill they create. I like the natural light and everything. Then they do it and they send it for roto. All of that is perfectly legit. It's all good.
yeah, I mean,
It's a
I
legitimate
agree with
argument.
that. Like, I don't like the blue screen either. I think it does give like a very artificial feeling to the whole thing, the
Yeah.
acting, everything. But
Somebody
yeah,
at somebody at
roto.
BNEG has to do a tutorial on how to use the sand screens.
Well, I
Yeah,
mean, I'm sure there's going to be breakdowns of this thing for all the awards
Yeah.
uh,
It does
stuff
look
coming
good.
up, and
It looks good.
everyone will. I actually am very curious to see the breakdowns of Dune, because something that I thought when I saw it, I fortunately got to see it in IMAX at one of the VES screenings out here in LA.
Awesome.
I thought it was fantastic. I thought the work looked great. The movie was great. The story was really good. My wife, she's not really a sci-fi person, and she really enjoyed the story. So, I mean, if she was able to enjoy the story, then that means
it's not an easy
it
story.
must have been pretty solid, because if it was like some deep sci-fi stuff, she would have fallen asleep.
No, that in the end, that's true. Yeah, the VFX are really good in it. And the movie's
Yeah.
really good. The whole thing's really good. Like because
I enjoyed it.
I've seen
I'm-
previous like attempts at the Dune series, and this one. I mean, I think this one's the most successful. I think this was the best one so far.
Yeah, no, it was great, and I think what to me was interesting, what is interesting about it is because the visual effects work was so well done. I'm actually quite curious to see what elements of some of those shots were real and what were CG or composited in or whatever.
Yeah.
There's some that are, of course, obvious to anybody working in this field, but I think there's probably going to be a few surprises where you're like, whoa, that I thought that was a set piece or something. There were a few shots in there where I was just from the standpoint of compositing alone, looking at the light interaction of somebody's hair as they were like standing in front of one of those spaceships. I think it was like maybe a quarter way through the film. And I was like, well, did they have some blocking piece here, or did they actually build a set piece and then build onto it? Like how were they dealing with that? That visual aspect of it,
Yeah, there's a few clips that I saw of actual plate footage that that's out there in like the VFX breakdowns that are out right now. There are some things where like they built actual prop helicopters for the orthonocopters, like the insect-like helicopters, and they're actual set pieces. But then like I was convinced they were CG, which tells me that like the actual CG helicopters that are in there, I don't know how to pronounce them correctly, are actually just like really well done. Because I was just like, I couldn't tell the difference anymore between what was actually a real set piece and what wasn't. So there's some really good work in there for sure.
Yeah.
Let's do a hot topic right now, like at the moment, which is the Weta Unity thing that just happened. So my whole thing about this is that I'm just excited that Unreal might actually have some competition, because people love Unreal. Unreal is great, but it's always good to have competition for us.
Yeah. Well, one of the good things about competition in terms of technology, of course, is that it makes the two competing products, their teams have to work harder to retain their user base and get customers. When you don't have a lot of competition, you end up with products that maybe stick around for 20, 30 years without any significant improvement, like maybe some unnamed visual effects software that we've all probably used. So when you don't, when you don't have competition, there's no reason for them. Why are they going to spend money on R&D to make the product better when people are paying for it anyway. They have a captive audience. But now there's some serious competition there. You have two really good game engines that are now moving into the field of sort of virtual production usage, and one of them is now deeply tied in with one of the biggest VFX facilities in the world, and the other one is being used by another huge VFX facility, ILM, on The Mandalorian. So, this is a really good thing.
Right. The thing that I was really shocked by, so like when I saw, I think it was a Variety article that talked about the Weta Unity acquisition, was how much Weta actually has. Weta has, like they have their own path tracer, they have their own real-time renderer, they have a bunch of tools for any kind of physics simulations. And the list goes on and on. I mean, I couldn't even finish it. There's just like 20, 30 tools that they've developed internally that like I guess we just never knew about, or unless you worked at Weta.
Yeah.
And all of that is under Unity now. And from what I understand, Unity's game plan is to just integrate it. They're just going to put it right into the software.
Wow.
So I think that's going to be pretty cool. I mean, I don't know how good their technologies are. I mean, I'm sure they're fantastic, but like in terms of being able to, because the thing about Unreal is that you get like really good looking stuff kind of quick, right? And that's always like a thing. You can make a tool that's really, really sophisticated and really powerful, but if it's not super easy to use, it might not get too far. So I'm really curious. I'm really curious what they're going to do with the Unity Weta thing. I'm also curious what's going to happen to Weta, because they have
to my understanding, I believe, and this might be totally the wrong information, but from the bit that I've read about it, it sounds like Unity was not acquiring Weta as a whole, that the division that actually does like VFX work for movies and TV shows and stuff is not absorbed into that. It's really mainly like their R&D or their technology division or whatever that's called. I believe it's that segment of it that Unity is now.
Yeah,
that's what I read too. The R&D is part of Unity now, and the Weta VFX group, the artists are just gonna be their main buyers. Basically, they have like
their testing team essentially.
Yeah.
Which I mean, no, that's a great thing. That's a great thing.
Nothing different for Weta artists.
Exactly. No, they're not gonna have like a cohesive interface to all their tools.
But having a highly skilled internal team always really helps the end product. Because I feel like Unreal has been also very successful because Unreal also produce games, so like they
AAA high-end
games. So they also like knew, okay, we need to improve this part of the package because we need this ourselves.
Yeah.
So that's how they improve that stuff.
I was shocked by the price tag. It was 1.6 billion for an R&D department inside a VFX company.
Yeah, it's.
What do they have? Like, what is this like?
They have the nuclear weapons of New Zealand.
There's some arcane magic happening at Weta that we don't know about. That's where it's.
I mean, I don't know. I mean, if you look at some of the films that they've done, they're definitely. And again, I've never worked there, unfortunately, but they're definitely using some special stuff, because I mean, if you look at some of the creatures that they make, like King Kong and
Planet of the Apes,
Planet of the Apes, and all these other films and stuff, Avatar, and some of those huge environments. I mean, they must be using special software for how to deal with stupid amounts of geometry and detail. And
I heard that they do a lot of passes for anything.
Well, they do. So, like, they're one of the few facilities that does deep.
Right. So they definitely
Yeah.
have a custom pipeline with custom software that deals with
Right.
that stuff. Otherwise, like it would be impossible to even like wait for it to render, like I feel.
I remember there was a animated movie that they did once. I forget what it was called. It was like this,
Alita Battle Angel?
nah. Before that, it was like it was based on something like kids book. I'm
Oh,
not gonna remember now. I think you guys, but I remember like this is such like a nerd out thing, but like I remember seeing the refractions in it. Like there will be these shots where like the character would walk behind like a tub of glass with water in like a fish tank, and I would watch the refractions. I'd be like, those are the best refractions I've ever seen in my life. Like, how did they do that? It was like absurd. Like you could, yeah, we know, whatever. I can nerd
Yeah.
out about, but that's all I could see in that movie was just like how good the refractions were. It's like, what are they using? Because this was like before like Arnold, I think. Like this
Yeah.
was before like you really had the stuff to do things like that. So yeah, I'm really excited what they're gonna drop into Unity. Um, so here's my last question. This is kind of like a funny question. Um, is the metaverse just like our new overlords now? Is the VFX industry? Are we just gonna work for the metaverse in like the next 10 years, just like making content for this digital universe that we're about to create, apparently, according to Zuckerberg?
I I hope not.
I'll tell you what, it will finally be the time the 3D movies actually mean something.
Yeah, there'll be real 3D movies. Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe that's an idea, actually. Maybe that's how it's gonna happen. Someone's gonna.
This this was the plan all along to make 3D movies
Mhm.
happening.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think those have really kind of waned a little bit in recent years, haven't they? They don't really
Yeah.
release too much in 3D anymore.
Yeah.
Well, I don't think I've seen like actually I'm surprised that I watched a couple of movies and I was surprised that they actually had a 3D in the
Yeah.
credit, the 3D conversion. Because I think at this point they just do 3D conversion. So they just rule it out and displace it in the
Yeah, it's too much work to shoot it
Yeah.
in native 3D. I mean,
yeah.
I could see, the few things that I really appreciated seeing in like real 3D were like some of those like nature documentary type things, like those like 3D IMAX, like, okay, we're gonna take you into a volcano or whatever kind
Yeah.
of crazy place because it felt immersive. But seeing a narrative film in 3D to me just never it, it was never really quite right,
Yeah.
and in some ways it always distracted you from the story for whatever reason. But maybe that's just because I'm used to, I grew up not looking at things in 3D,
Right.
Well,
sorry, not viewing content in 3D.
I
Obviously I've
yeah,
Yes,
binocular
you have spatial.
you have
You have
seen things
spatial.
in 3D.
Yeah.
I think I noticed with video games what the issue mainly was because like when they added 3D to video games, game engines are not good at having things blurry, you know. So like everything is sharp, and at that point you decide where you put your eye gaze. Like you can choose, oh, I want to see things that are far in the back or far in the
Mm.
front, and that doesn't happen with the movies because the cameras don't work that way. So I noticed a lot in the movies. I was forced, especially in being a person that used to wear glasses all the time after the laser. Thank God, no. But but like like I'm noticing like okay, I'm forced to watch this person even though my eyes are wandering to see something in the background, but I cannot see them because it's blurry, and I felt like I took my glasses off, and it was very frustrating.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and I think that really doesn't work in a movie because you're trying to, like as you said, like give a story that is compressed in 2 hours, and you really want people to focus on one thing, and you can't just have everything like on focus so that so people can wander with their eyes everywhere.
Yeah.
So I feel like the video game space was a lot more suited for 3D stereoscopic content than movies.
There's
And I think that that was the biggest problem of 3D movies. Because like eventually, like any 3D movie that I watch, the first 15 minutes you notice the 3D, and the rest your brain just like clears it out because like
yeah.
you're forced to see what they want you to see anyway. So like you better not even, care about it.
Yeah.
And that's what happened to me.
There was I think Oz, you were there actually. There was a SIGGRAPH that we went to the last, I think in LA, and there was a speaker there, and it was a panel about VR and AR. And there was a speaker there who she was around for VR when it first happened in the 80s, right? Because it goes way back. And she made a really good slide that showed what people did in the 80s and what people do now, and how there's really no difference. And it didn't succeed in the 80s, so why would it succeed now?
Yeah.
Right. And that was kind of the logic. It's like, if you're going to do this, you have to do something that isn't the mistakes of the past, because we already did this kind of. There's actually fun fact. I was watching during Halloween. I was watching like the Friday the 13th movies. I think one of those classic franchises. And the third movie was a stereo movie. It was in stereo, and well, I didn't watch it in stereo because they didn't. That's not what they had on like HBO Max or whatever. But if you know that it's in stereo and you see what they were doing, like must have been the most painful movie experience ever. Part of the horror show was just experiencing the stereo, because they would do things, like they would grab a knife and just put it into the camera, right? But if you understand
Right.
stereo, like that thing is like completely past like the focus, the
Yeah.
plane of
It's
the screen.
through the screen
It's
popping
through the
out at you,
screen,
which
so you're
is
just like,
definitely that's like what they were doing in the 80s, right?
yeah,
Yeah.
like they were trying
Yeah.
to push it as hard as possible, and it's like, this is not going to be comfortable for anybody to watch. And kind of similar things were happening with stereo when they were doing it recently, a few years ago now.
Yeah.
Now a lot of it wasn't smart. A lot of it was kind of visually confusing. Like some people were getting headaches from it. So there's a lot to figure out. I think it's just one of those things. It's like really hard to figure out how to do a story in 3D that isn't like a video game, or something like that, right? It's hard to do.
Yeah. I mean,
And I don't know if Zuckerberg's going to do it. I don't know if he's the guy.
I don't know.
John, would
but-
you like to get a chance to try at least making like a 3D story, given the opportunity? Would you like to like be a visual effects supervisor on a movie that they tell you like this is just gonna be in 3D?
So I've worked on a few 3D shows as a compositor in the past. And I mean, it was definitely an interesting learning experience. I think if the film was really designed to be a 3D film, and it was really well thought out and had a really good reason for why it's using 3D, that had something to do with how the viewer experiences the story or the story itself or something, then sure. But I don't like 3D as a gimmick, as a way to upsell a movie ticket or any of that stuff. Like I don't, I see it the same as choosing to present a film in black and white instead of color. That if you take color film, color content as a technology, which it literally was when we went from black and white to color, and you take that technology as something you're using as a creative decision in the telling of the story, then maybe 3D makes sense in some cases. But I feel like in the vast majority of cases that I've mostly seen, it doesn't really make sense in terms of the story, you know?
Mhm. Yeah.
So it's like saying, okay, like anything else, like, am I going to put the camera on a dolly, or am I going to handhold it, or am I going to steady cam it? You know?
Yeah. It has to tell the story.
Yeah, it's like, what's the reason you're doing this? You know, what is
Right.
the motivation for doing this thing?
Yeah.
And
That's
if the motivation is just to sell $10 extra $10 surcharge movie tickets, I don't I don't think that's really a good
yeah.
reason. At least as somebody who's a creative person, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and it seems like it hasn't worked out in the market either that way. It
Yeah,
doesn't seem so,
of
yeah.
course.
Yeah.
And that's probably going to be the fate of Meta or the metaverse, is like, it has to make sense. You know, it has to be, it has to make sense.
I mean,
I,
the other thing too is, you know, a better technology than 3D is probably VR, right? Or AR.
Right.
But the challenge with VR and AR is we are so used to experiencing film and TV shows from a certain viewpoint, right? And it's very hard to tell a story where you can look any direction instead of the direction that you need to be looking, because it's very easy to miss a detail that somebody adds, you know, to a scene. Like, for example, imagine a situation where, like, you're in a room and there's some tense situation happening, right? And there's a shot in the film of a knife on the counter, which to your mind, you're like, oh shit, there's now a dangerous weapon
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
in this world, right? Which heightens the suspense of the scene. If you're in VR and you're watching the same thing play out and you don't look to the bottom left where that
Yeah.
knife is in this VR movie, you're going to miss that detail and you're going to have a completely different
Right.
interpretation of what's happening there, or a different level of suspense than the creator is intending you to, you know what I mean?
It's like, why is everyone so anxious?
Yeah.
Right, exactly. It's like, if you didn't notice that, you know, the guy put a dangerous thing in a car, or whatever, you know, like.
Yeah. I feel like, what's it, is it Inarita? Who did Children of Men? There's some directors, especially the ones that do like oneers and stuff, that they could really succeed in like a VR movie, because their whole game is they have so much detail in the background.
Alfonso Cuarón made the Children of Men.
Yeah, like he's famous for, just, if you really look at all of everything he shoots, there's layers and layers of stuff in the background that just keeps expanding on the story. But he also manages to keep everything in the foreground. Like, he would make such a good VR movie, I feel like, because you could, if every time you look around, you would probably learn more and more about what's happening.
Yeah,
and you would really be tempted to just kind of be like, really exist in the world.
It would have to be something that was designed very, very thoughtfully and specifically, you know, like in order to do a VR movie right, you know, like you just have to be extremely mindful of the fact that somebody could look in some other direction than where you need them to look, you know.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, very tricky, very tricky.
Make Gravity. I feel Gravity will be a great VR experience.
In a way, like the absence.
There is a lack of
the absence of things in a way can also just can force you to really focus on just what's in front of you,
or really feel, you know, the fact that you have nothing to like grasp on.
Exactly. No, yeah, like literally you're in the middle of nothing.
Yeah, like, I mean, Gravity would probably work as a VR
experience.
Film. Yeah, I think the way that you'd have to approach it, the way you'd have to approach it is you would have to have something happening like almost all the time that was so interesting and stimulating that you couldn't help but look toward that thing, you know, and have minimal distractions for what else you could see. But then at the same time,
But then
one
what's the
would
difference of
argue,
having like a 2D screen instead of a
what's
VR?
the point? Exactly.
Yeah,
It's like,
exactly. Why
okay, if
did
there's
you?
nothing else interesting to look at, why do I need to experience this content in this way?
Yeah,
You
yeah.
know, so
I-
it's
It's a no, again, that's
yeah.
it's a really difficult problem to solve, but for some reason everyone keeps trying to solve it. They
I
keep
think
trying to make
it's
these things happen.
I mean, it's a fascinating problem because it's such a high, it's such a really complicated way of telling a story, you know, and we're
Yeah,
really not used to it. And I mean, even video games per se are really hard to tell a story through it, you know, like a
yeah,
meaningful story. Like right now, most video games tell a story like a movie does, but like actually experience the story through the action that you do is very complicated and
yeah,
very fascinating.
no,
Um,
absolutely, yeah.
and I think like that complication makes our brain interested, even though sometimes, you know, we like to overcomplicate things for no reason.
Well, that's the
Like,
story. That's the story of creatives, really.
yeah,
Why do we
maybe.
keep overcomplicating everything? Okay, I'm being told that we're gonna have to stop this soon.
Okay.
So, John, thank you very much. I feel like we ended on. I feel like Meta is just the best place to stop. You know, because it's just like our inevitable dystopian future of living in the. Well, if you follow the Dune universe, they actually had Meta for a while, and then it ended, and now you're at the Dune universe. So right, because it's 10,000 years in the future, so
Right.
they gave up on AI and everything eventually. So maybe it'll be okay.
Maybe.
I hope so.
Oh, let's hope so.
Yeah, it was great. It was great chatting, guys. Thanks for having me.
No, thank you for taking the time. I know it's super busy for you, and let's. What show are you on right now? You were saying?
Yeah, so the show is called The Offer.
Nice.
It's going to be on Paramount Plus. I don't think there's a release date set yet, but um, rough summary, which I think is public knowledge already, or at least I hope it is.
Mhm.
It's a narrative telling of how The Godfather was made.
Oh, interesting.
And yeah, basically based on the accounts of Al Ruddy, who was the producer of The Godfather.
Nice.
Yeah.
Awesome. There's a lot of Godfather fans going to be into that.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, it's definitely, we're doing everything we can to make it the best that it can possibly be. Of
Right.
course, not just for the show, but of course it's a iconic film.
Right.
So
For the fan base.
we're definitely trying to do it right.
All
All
right.
right.
Yeah.
All right. I'm excited to see you in the credits, and I'm sure it's going to be amazing.